Hey, deserving listeners, happily ever after, let's watch and see what happens.
It's like he has a lot of hate in his heart against me, bro. No, I'm not letting you bother with your trash-ass behavior. I can see you through you straight away. He's a drunk.
So one question that I would be mulling over in this moment is whether or not Andrei and Charlie actually came to the session wanting to work in therapy, or if they just came to the session to sabotage it or to attack the other person. It happens sometimes. And there's kind of a fine line between someone who is not reachable, someone who there's just really no way to get them on board with therapy there. Even if you do all the right things and everyone else is doing everything great, the individual will still continue to sabotage the situation. So, if someone decides that they're going to do that, then, they're going to do that. And so sometimes you have to make a decision as a therapist whether or not to recommend that maybe we reconfigure those that come to the session. And you can do subtle things, like you can meet with different pockets of people, maybe keeping Charlie and Andrei apart from each other. I've done that before. I've had family clients where one of the individuals was so distorted, so personality disordered, that there was very little likelihood, and I tried a lot to reach them, very low likelihood of them having any kind of taking any kind of responsibility or having any insight into their part of the problem. If we're time limited, meaning that I don't have 15 years to work on the issue, then I will work around it. I might continue to meet with that person, but I will set my sights on what I can change in the family and stop beating my head against the wall to try to change the things that don't seem to have a way to change very quickly. I hesitate to even say that because I tend to always believe that there's always a way in. But like I said, there's sometimes an economy of time that you have to think about. Is there a way that the therapist could reach Charlie and reach Andrei within this format? Yeah, you give someone enough time, or at the very least, there's a lot of things one could try. But what's best for the family? What could be accomplished in the first 5 sessions, the first 10 sessions? You just have to think like, well, maybe I'll table that issue because that one seems too big. Trying to get Charlie to say, maybe I have an issue, because there's all these other things that come into play, like how much of an addict is he? Is he an addict at all? Does he have any level of insight? Is he willing to talk at all about his issue of drinking? It's just hard to know. So sometimes you have to target. So I guess what I would do would be, I would suspect that the first session would be hard to rein in. And then I would want to meet with the people that were quieter, maybe Jen and Becky. I would want to meet with, and Pam maybe, and Libby. I don't know. I would want to meet with different configurations. I would want to meet with Chuck and Libby and Becky, maybe Pamela, to go over the history. Libby, when you talk about that things weren't good before, what do you mean by that? Because I'd have to explain to people, like, some of the problems that we're seeing today might be symptoms of an underlying issue. Not that there's some nefarious thing, but that all of you have felt maybe disjointed and disconnected and alone for a long time. And the symptoms of that loneliness, that chronic loneliness in this family, even though you have a lot of contact, from what I understand, there might be a lot of hurt, a lot of sadness. And if I can get to that foundation, I might be able to help with that such that the other things will fall into place, like the Andrei thing and the Charlie thing. So can you tell me more about that? And perhaps with Libby's truth-telling, I might be able to get to the bottom of that. And then I would suspect that if Andrei wasn't there and Charlie wasn't there, then the session would be more differentiated, more calm, better able to have a rational discussion. I might want to meet alone. I guess to give everyone equal time, I would meet alone with Charlie and Megan, maybe. That would be a logical grouping. And then maybe Andrei and Libby, that kind of thing. And just hope that I can somehow engineer things that can be worked on in the beginning and, like I said, table the things that seemingly are bigger issues. And sometimes the bigger issues would just work themselves out. Once you work on the easier stuff, it sort of gets the ball rolling. That's the idea in family therapy anyway, is that because The idea is it's different schools of thought, but many of the schools of thought in family therapy adhere to the notion that if you can just get families into a progression where they have a foundation of health that's at least somewhat there, then they will gravitate towards health. That you don't have to tinker them all the way down the pathway. You just have to kind of set some things up, and then things will just kind of start progressing because people want to be healthy. That at least that's the philosophy in this camp. They want to have a good relationship. They want to have a healthy family. So you don't have to constantly tinker and change every little thing. You just have to get them the tools to find their own health.
I don't even care about being around you. Okay, so good, so keep it to yourself. I don't care.
And just a small little thought here. Sometimes I will actually, in the middle of session, say, okay, you know what? I think this is getting a little volatile. How about we split the session where this half of the room stays and the other half of the room steps out into the lobby, and then we'll switch in 20 minutes because I feel like things are getting off the rails and I'm still trying to assess the situation, and I'm finding it a little hard given the volatility of this relationship here. So I definitely want to work on it, but so let's flip a coin and see who leaves the room and who stays, and then, like I said, we'll switch in 20 minutes. Is that okay with everyone? And again, if you're a strong leader, you can usually pull that off.
Charlie Vabam was saying that Elizabeth's family was close before she met me. But it's not true. The relationship that they had before me was so up with the screaming and the bickering and the aggression. That's all they know. That's how.
Well, that says something, Andrei. I mean, with all the screaming and the bickering and the aggression, I wonder why she chose you to marry. And I've been saying this from the beginning to Andrei. He could really help the situation if he just said nothing. Libby will say the words. Libby will communicate. She will just do it in a way that the family might be able to hear. But if you keep spouting and getting aggressive, it'll negate what Libby is trying to do, one. Two, it just gives everyone legitimate reasons to scapegoat you. It's like but that's the way systems operate, is people will step into a role. They will volunteer for a role even though they're not consciously knowing what they're doing. If you just looked at his behavior from a surface level, you're like, well, clearly that person wants to be the center of attention. Clearly they want to be the hated individual because Andrei keeps pushing everyone's buttons and he keeps speaking up about things that he doesn't know about, things that he doesn't have to talk about, keeps butting in and, aggressively participating. And he doesn't have to do that. And so you would think, well, clearly that fella wants to be hated in this family. But he would consciously say, no, I'm trying to be liked. I'm actually standing up for myself. So when we're in families, the more fusion, the more undifferentiation, the more unhealth, the more likely it is, if you're in a family like that, that you are unconsciously participating in the cycle, and your conscious mind is like, well, I'm only doing this because it's logical, but you're really playing a part in a toxic dance.
Because they cannot handle the fact that the family are the fault of this, not me.
How do you allow your son-in-law to attack him in your own house?
Yeah.
That is why I was pointing my finger, because of that.
You're doing just
nothing else.
Same thing now.
Okay.
So you can push somebody and just get away with
He got
it?
up in his face,
exactly.
Libby.
You can't. You gotta let other people speak.
So I think the session has been going on for a while. I mean, we've only seen a total of maybe 7 minutes, even though I've been yammering for hours about this. But I suspect that she has been repeatedly trying to get them to speak one at a time. And so she seems a little exasperated there, And I imagine to audiences, it might look like the therapist is failing, like the therapist has lost control. There's a huge myth out there, and I have to demythify my students of this notion that somehow as a therapist you're supposed to be in total control, and that the marker of a good family session is if everyone is calm and calmly talking. And certainly that's great, but if a family has conflict and undifferentiation, and has a pattern of aggressively talking to each other and fighting. As I was saying earlier, at the very least, it's good to see, and so you can know what it looks like as people are doing it, because it can be very subtle, and to hear people describe it does not encapsulate it. You have to see it actually in action. So, one, it's good for assessment, and two, you can help people as they're yelling at each other. There's various different ways one can move towards health while these sorts of things are happening, you know? Like, the way that I tend to want to engineer things is, so if Charlie is like, it's all Andrei's fault, it's all Andrei's fault, okay? Instead of going, and Charlie's interrupting, instead of like pushing back on Charlie, I might work with him and say, okay, Charlie, what are you saying? Andrei, give me a second with Charlie. I have a path that I'm taking him down. So, be patient, because I'm about to go down a road of like, Charlie, tell me why Andrei's the problem. And then Charlie's like, because everything's screwed up now. Everything. Okay, what's screwed up? What's screwed up? Well, he just screws everything up. Well, what is screwed up? What do you wish to be different? Well, everyone hates me now. Okay, so everyone hates you now. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, it's all Andrei. Okay, it's all Andrei's fault. I hear that from you. But what's going on? Well, everyone hates me now. Like, no one talks to me. Like, my sisters, Libby and Becky and Jen, went through a period of time where they didn't even talk to me anymore. They reject me and Megan and my kids. Okay, so that's awful. Is that what I'm hearing? You don't like that? I mean, it makes sense. You don't like? Yeah, I don't like that. It sucks. Okay, tell me more about that. Tell me. Well, it just pisses me off. They think that I'm an alcoholic or something. I'm not. I mean, everyone drinks. Okay, so you feel like you're being accused. So I'm going with Charlie and having very vulnerable communication. I don't know exactly where it's headed, but I know that it's better than just everyone screaming at each other, And then maybe people can hear Charlie's vulnerability and at the very least, like, care for him and have compassion. You wouldn't necessarily excuse his behavior. Same with Andrei, with everyone. It's just like, okay, tell me more. Like, I got you. He's the problem, whatever. Andrei, Charlie, what's going on for you? Because underneath what they're yelling about on the surface is probably the real material.
Nothing else.
Same thing now.
Okay. So you can push somebody and just get away with it?
He got up in his face,
exactly.
Libby.
You gotta let other people speak.
Okay, we're gonna do it. I didn't want to have to do it, but we're gonna do it.
Okay, I don't know, but I suspect that she's going to have a physical object that you hold on to, and if you don't have the physical object, you can't talk. You will do this with teenagers. She probably is thinking, well, I don't want to do this because normally I have to do this with kids, but I guess I have to do it with you, so everyone hold on to this thing, and then you can talk. It's similar to the conch in Lord of the Flies. So, I think that's what she's doing.
If you're holding this, you're the one talking, and you're either talking to me or to one other person.
Yeah, I mean, and they're editing different exasperated reactions, but we don't know if those were happening in that moment. So, yeah, it makes sense. I've been saying from the beginning, there's various different ways to handle this. For me, what I've seen thus far as a family therapist of 25 years and a trainer for 25 years of family therapist, this session is par for the course. It just is, especially knowing what we know about this family. I mean, there's really nothing, if anything, a lot of good is happening because they're not totally screaming at each other and getting violent with each other. They're talking. They're in the same room and they're staying in the same room, and that's a step forward. It doesn't look very healthy because look where they're coming from though. At least they're talking. It's a good thing. So the fact that Pamela and Chuck are in the same room, you know what I mean? So there's to me, when I watch this, if she were a trainee or a colleague, and she were to come to me, I'd be like, great job. Yeah, good start. How do you feel? It's a volatile session, but family therapy is volatile. I mean, that's the other thing to think about is like for family therapists like her, you might have 8 sessions a day that look just like this. This session isn't just like some wacky, weird session in the middle of the day. Like you could literally, your entire day could be filled with sessions like this. There have been portions of my career where that was the case, and you just get used to it. It's just like you're a first responder or something, it's not super easy, but it makes the day go by real fast. If you've ever had a job where you're looking at the clock, you never look at the clock in these kinds of sessions. I mean, the time just goes winging by because there's just so much stuff happening, and it's fun, and I enjoyed it. It was hard, and it was a lot of countertransference, and I struggled because you just have to. There's no amount of skill as a therapist you can have to negate the struggle, but it was dynamic and interesting and memorable, and I felt like I earned my money, and the gratification and the thanks that I would get from families once I got even just a little bit down the road to health. I mean, they would turn to me just like, Kirk, thank you. Like the first few sessions that we had, I just thought we were doomed, and you've actually stuck with us. I mean, because that's another part of actually the therapeutic action in therapy, is that as a therapist, you're kind of like everyone's parent. It's not always the case, but often that is a part of therapy. And there's a lot of discussion around this, around power and one up, one down styles of therapy. Some therapists want to level the playing field, and they don't want to be elevated and stuff. But, it's kind of hard to avoid because the therapist is seen as someone that knows a lot about the topic and also is not involved in the conflict. They're an outside observer watching people have struggles, and inevitably, particularly the parents in all likelihood, feel like failures as this is happening. It's like, I'm a big failure. I've completely failed. I'm a bad parent. I'm a bad person. I mean, look, and one of the best things that you can do therapeutically in the beginning of therapy as a therapist is to what object relations people called create a holding environment, where you're holding the emotional difficulty, meaning that you don't run out of the room screaming, or you don't chastise them, or you don't shrink in the corner, or you don't blank out. You stay in contact and you're okay with it. You recognize the intensity of it and you feel bad for people, but it doesn't destroy you. You're like, well, come back next week. We'll keep on working on it. It gives the family this notion of just like, oh, well, the clinician seems to be saying that we can get better. So, and they're an expert. So if they think we can get better, then maybe if we keep coming, we can get better. Or maybe we're not as bad as we thought we were. And that's another thing that I would tell novice therapists is in that first session, you want to instill hope. You want to talk about the strengths that you can see. And if you can't see strengths, so that's just one thing to think about that is hard for people. It's a skill. It's a competency that takes time for a lot of people because we're taught in our society to look at the deficits, and particularly when it's a reality TV show. But it's a muscle that you have to grow to notice and reflect back honestly and genuinely the strengths that you can see. So I'll do it right now. So pause the video if you want to and take some time and think or jot down what you think are the strengths, and legit strengths. Not just like, sometimes people say like, well, a strength of this family is that they have so many weaknesses and they still manage to not kill each other or something like that. And, it's like, well, that's not really pointing to genuine strengths that would really empower these people and make them feel good about themselves, And it's not putting sunshine up their butt. It's actually growing a muscle in your soul, in your perceptual awareness that you can actually pick up on strengths. And there's a whole group of therapy that involves themselves with this. Positive psychology, solution focus, narrative, other kinds of therapies are very much oriented this way. But so what I would say is that the family had a legit strength. I said this earlier, that they're able to talk about this. They're able to sit in a room and actually face the issue, and that they showed up. That's a big deal. A lot of families, at least part of the families, particularly like the Charlie and the Andres of the world, could find an excuse. I don't want to go. You can't make me. I'm sick. I'm busy with work or whatever. I'm not going to be in a room with that a-hole. And so I would say that, and I might even single out Andrei and Charlie, and I would say, so I just want to point out that you actually showed up, and that is big. That means that there's a part of you, I suspect, that actually believes that maybe this could get better. Maybe it's hard to see. It's not hard for me to see, but for you, you believe, you want to make this work. And that might be a strategic thing to highlight, right? Because if everyone can believe that, if I can really sell it, because I do believe it to be true, like I said, they could have not shown up. They could have stayed home. They could have completely sabotaged, and, they're not. They're coming from their distorted place that has led them to this place, and it's very common. The kinds of problems that they suffer from, very common in families. So that would be one strength. Another strength I would point out is that the children seemingly, the Libby, the Becky, the Charlie, the Jens are seemingly, not so much Jen, she hasn't said it much at all, at least in the edit, seemingly are able to speak their mind, particularly Libby and Charlie, that they feel able to share. And it looks like there's a time, and maybe even now, where there was a lot of involvement in each other's lives. I understand that some of you work together with Chuck, and Chuck, I want to point out that you are a very good communicator. You were trying to help Charlie, but at the same time, you were telling him that, I think you were saying you kind of miss being close to him. You said that there was a time when he was the closest person in the family, or closest kid with you, that you worked a lot together, and you showed some real vulnerability there, some real longing. You want that to be happening, and that shows tremendous maturity and warmth and compassion, and that's it's a good father that you're able to do that. Pamela, so I'd worry about Pamela at that moment because parents will compare themselves to each other, particularly divorced parents. Pamela, you are sticking up for your family. You seem to be sticking up for Charlie, and that's good. You want your kids to get along. It seems like that's something that you really want, and every parent wants that for their kids, of course. And I'm guessing that it's been frustrating for you. And often when I say that, the Pamelas will be, yes, it's very frustrating. And then I can get to that longing and that positive place. And I might be able to even at that point go around the room and just say like, okay, so if there's a way for me as a therapist, and I've been doing this for a long time, I don't know, I have optimism, but if I'm able to help you, you have to do a lot of work, but I'll help with my expertise, and I've done this before. If I can help you to have less conflict and more closeness, would you take me up on that opportunity? Would you like to do that? Say 5, 10 sessions, maybe 20. Would you take that opportunity? If I could tell you that there was a pretty good chance, 75% chance or something, that if everyone works as best as they can, tries to understand each other, tries to communicate better, that we can repair the hurt and that we can have less conflict. You can begin to hang out together. There can be closeness. There can be even deeper relationships and repair. If I can help you with that, would you take it? Now, I never know what people are going to say to that, but if I can get everyone to at least kind of nod their head, that's a huge win, right? That's a goal right there, because they're all admitting to each other that they're willing to work, and they're admitting to me, or they're telling me, yes, we want therapy. You know what I mean? Because if I have one person that's like, no, then I might have to have a conversation with that person. Like, well, do you want to maybe sit out for a few sessions? Because you don't have to, but I see a lot of other people nodding their heads. And so I only want to work with people who actually want therapy, and there's no harm, no foul. You don't have to come to therapy. So, that'd be another thing that I might do. And if a lot of people or all of them nod their head, I would say, what a strength that all of you have. What a dedication to family. So many families are suffering in this way, and you will never know because they're not on a reality TV show and they don't come into therapy. So, and they don't tell you about it. But believe me, a lot of families are doing this, but you are different. You're actually coming to a professional and trying to get better. That shows tremendous strength. And I believe it. As I'm telling them that, I believe it. I'm not just saying that crap. And there are many other strengths that I'd probably be able to identify if I were actually there and seeing the whole session. But yeah. So you want clients leaving the office, and that, especially at the end of that first session, thinking, maybe this can work. I don't see how, but maybe it can work. I guess I do have strengths. I'm not a complete loser. I'm not a failure as a parent. That's really important, because one of the most shameful things, unfortunately, and it's not a shameful thing, but people often consider it to be, as a parent, is to have to take your family to therapy. A lot of parents will consider it this massive failure. Like, I tried, I failed, now a professional has to come in and clean up my mess. And that is not what you want your parents to be thinking. You want your parents to be thinking, it's hard and it's transgenerational. You only can parent as as good or maybe a little better if you work hard at it than your parents parented you. So some of us are starting at a deficit from the beginning. And there's no family in the history of humankind, in my opinion, that doesn't need occasional family therapy. So, it's just hard, there's hurt feelings. It just happens. So anyway, that's what I would try to accomplish. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.